When Nike introduced their futuristic Adapt BB self-lacing shoes, the tech-obsessed part of me couldn't wait to step into a pair. And even though they were extraordinarily difficult to get a hold of, when I finally got my hands on a pair, it truly was like stepping into the future. And despite their shortcomings, I enjoyed them so much that the instant that Nike updated the line to version 2.0, I was on board immediately. After anxiously waiting, they finally arrived. And thus began my experience of stepping back into the future. Packaging-wise, there aren't a ton of similarities between the two boxes. Version 1 packaging had the shoes compartmentalized, whereas the version 2 has the shoes set up in a traditional format that you would see in really any box of shoes. The wireless charging pad is tucked in a little compartment underneath, and the USB-C charger and brick are in their own little box in a separate compartment. On the outside, the shoes look remarkably similar. There are a handful of changes, however. Some are subtle, some not so much. The dual-layer mesh of the first version, where the top layer was a net-like material that you could see through and was a nightmare to clean, making you have to do this weird thing where you pulled apart the top layer to jam a brush or something in between the two layers in order to scrub it clean, has thankfully been reworked where, even though it is still dual-layer, the top layer is now solid, and getting anything on the shoes won't get the layer underneath dirty. And because the loop is no longer attached to the mesh, in addition to making it easier to clean, you can now open the shoe much wider in order to get your foot into it. I've always been a big fan of the futuristic sound that the shoes make whenever they lace and unlace, and with version 2, there's an added visual touch as well, as the top portion of the laces are exposed so that you can visually see them loosen and tighten. Although it had a loop attached to the tongue for pulling the shoe on, the original version lacked anything along the back in order to be able to pull up and slide your heel in. On this version of the shoe, the loop is back, but now they have added on a very sturdy loop across the back so that you can loop your finger in and make it much easier to pull it onto your foot than the older version was. Setting up version 2 of the shoes is virtually identical to the setup of version 1, but it's after the setup where you'll first notice the major difference between this version and the last version, and that's comfort. Now, I'm looking at this from a perspective of everyday use and not on the basketball court. There are plenty of great reviews from YouTubers out there on the on-court feel who have much more experience on the court and how these compare to other shoes that they've worn. For me, however, apart from the technology, my primary concern is how they would feel after being on my feet 7 to 8 hours a day and then spending about an hour weight training. The short version? I couldn't be happier. I've always preferred the corded lace system in these type of shoes as opposed to traditional laces for the fact that the cords are always very consistent regardless of whether they're wet, dry, or the temperature, allowing you to dial in an exact level of comfort that you just can't replicate with traditional laces. And in this version, it seems like the system, for lack of a better way to explain it, is more thorough with its coverage of your foot, and it doesn't feel like it's just pulling down on the top of your foot like the old ones, and feels more like it's actually wrapping around your entire foot. Weight training, running, or even just walking in these shoes feels even better than it did in the first version, as the general feel of the shoe is just more comfortable and feels like there's a greater level of support for your heels and the ball of your foot. As I continue to wear these over the next several weeks, I'll be sure to keep everyone posted on my thoughts of how worth it they are for the $400 asking price. And if I run into any technical issues like I did with the first pair, where the shoe would inexplicably believe it was charging when it was on my foot. As a side note, for being a shoe company and not a tech company, Nike handled the situation very well and was quick to get me a pair of replacement shoes when mine malfunctioned. Well, that's all I have for today. Thanks for stopping by the channel, and if there's any questions that you have about these shoes or anything that you would like me to try out, please let me know in the comments below and I'll be sure to include them in a future video. Until next time, thanks for watching.